today's video, I am going to be ranking the top 10 NFL defenses heading into the 2025 NFL season. Subscribe and like the video if you do go on to enjoy. Let's hop into it. Before we get into our top 10, I do have 3 honorable mentions. These are teams that easily could be in my top 10, but for certain specific reasons, they're not in my top 10. Those teams are going to be the Seattle Seahawks, the Los Angeles Rams, and the Buffalo Bills. But we are going to begin with, at number 10, I have the Chicago Bears. Now, last year, the Chicago Bears came into the season as potentially one of, if not the best rosters defensively in the entire NFL. And for a large chunk of the season, they actually played up to their level until they fired Matt Eberflus, and then the defense just completely fell down the tank. This one is obviously a little bit more of a projection because this was a great defense with Matt Eberflus, but then he left, and then all of a sudden the defense fell apart. So I'm going to assume with a new defensive coordinator in Dennis Allen heading in there, he's going to be able to right the ship and get this Bears defense back on track. Last year, they ranked 14th in opponents' points per game, 27th in opponents' yards per game, and 5th in opponents' touchdowns per game. They were top 5 in red zone scoring percentage, 5th on 4th down, and 12th on 3rd down. They really struggled against the run, and against the pass, they were about middle of the pack, with some being in top 10 conversations. Again, this is a bit more of a projection. I look at this defense, there really is not a single hole on this roster, maybe outside of like depth in the edge rushing room. But even then, I do think there is some talent behind the guys like Montez Sweat and Dayo Odeyingbo. Of course, the secondary is loaded with talent. The front 7 looks really good on paper. I just expect this Bears defense to be a whole heck of a lot better. And with this Bears offense taking a nice step forward in year 2 of Caleb Williams, like we all expected to do, we can sort of see a better combination of a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense if things really go well. I'm not predicting the Bears offense to be top 10, by the way. I'm just saying best case scenario. But if that Bears offense can be like top 20, top 15, and this Bears defense can just make up and do what they did last year prior to Matt Eberflus being fired, then I think this Bears defense will be a top 10 unit and look pretty good next year. Coming in at number 9, I have the Minnesota Vikings. Now, Minnesota last year had the 4th lowest opponents' points per game, 6th lowest opponents' touchdowns per game, and 13th lowest opponents' yards per game. They are really good against the run. In fact, they're excellent against the run, ranking top 5 in multiple categories, and pretty solid against the pass too. My only concern for Minnesota is just the simple fact that I do expect this offense to take a slight step back because they have a rookie quarterback, which is going to put the defense in more tougher situations. I also think the secondary has some question marks. Isaiah Rodgers is stepping into a big-time role. You lose Cameron Bynum in your secondary. I expect the secondary to still be really good because they have a lot of fun pieces, some versatility back there too. But I just have a couple question marks with that secondary, especially if Harrison Smith takes a step back because he is getting a little bit older. I expect that front 7 to be really good next year. Yet again, I expect them to get to the quarterback really consistently. Hopefully, Dallas Turner can take a nice step forward. My question for this team is, what does that secondary look like? Will it be as good or on par as what they were last year? And can this offense still be super dominant? Because if that offense is able to control the ball, then I do think the Vikings have the talent defensively to be a top 6 to top 7 defense. But as of right now, because we have so many question marks with JJ McCarthy and some general questions about the overall defense, I'm going to have them down at 9, but I could easily see them being moved up the board. Moving over to number 8, I have the Detroit Lions. Now, a couple of things that I said about the Vikings also do have to be taken into account with this Lions team. This Lions offense was the best offense in the NFL last year for 99% of the season. With Ben Johnson out the door, does that potentially open up the possibility of this offense taking a small step back, which is going to put this defense probably in some more situations they're not accustomed to? I expect this offense to still be really good. In fact, they're probably going to be a top 5 offense when it's all said and done. The next question with this defense is no more Aaron Glenn. Does that affect the overall defense? There's also some just general concerns I do have with this defense. Starting off, Aiden Hutchinson's coming off a broken leg. Can you seriously trust on him to get to the quarterback 12 to 11 times next year? Because if you can't, I don't really know who else on this edge rushing room is going to be a consistent threat to get to the quarterback. Marcus Davenport, Josh Pascal, I'm not too sure what you're getting from those guys. With that said, every other position here is really solid, and I actually think there's a lot of solid depth here too. You bring in DJ Reed to play opposite of either Terrion Arnold or maybe Ennis Rakestra or maybe a Meek Robinson. Even Avonte Maddox can also play there too. I love your safety duo. I just think there's a lot of fun talent in the secondary. If Terrion Arnold can take that next step in year 2, this secondary could very well end up being a top 5 unit in the entire league. I just generally worry about where the production is sack-wise to get to the quarterback. I just really worry about that production. In terms of some statistics from last year, a lot of these numbers aren't impressive, but you also have to take into account that, like, by week 10, this defense was throwing out some stinky lineups, like backups in multiple positions. Some guys who weren't even on the roster come week 1 had to actually play some legitimate snaps for this team. So I'm not even going to really bring up the statistics. Even so, the numbers aren't even that bad. 11th in opponents' points per game, 13th in opponents' touchdowns per game, number 1 opponent third down conversion rate, multiple numbers within the top 10 against the run, multiple numbers within the top 15 against the pass. Again, I don't really take too much from that just because of the simple fact that they were so banged up by the back end of the year that the numbers don't really matter to me. All in all, this Lions team has potential to be really good. I just think they need to answer a couple of questions before I can feel more confident about moving them upwards. Moving over to number 7, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. This was already a almost top 5 to top 7 unit last year. They're essentially running back the exact same team, minus a safety, but for the most part, almost everyone who they had last year is back again this year. You add in an Omar Norman Lott. You now give Jaden Hicks an increased role. And that's really the only difference in this defense. Maybe Felix Uzoma can make some plays next year. I'm not really counting on it. It's a very similar unit to what it was last year. And last year, they ranked 6th in opponents' points per game, 8th in opponents' touchdowns per game, 11th in a red zone percentage, 10th in opponents' yards per game, solid against the run, about middle of the pack against the pass. Again, this is kind of a boring breakdown, but not a whole lot to talk about here. It's basically the exact same unit, plus a couple new faces, but I don't really expect those new faces to either hurt them nor seriously help them. If there was one guy who I think could maybe move this team from 7 to potentially higher, you would need a guy like Omar Norman Lott to really be a nice pass rush presence up the middle and almost kind of serve like a Milton Williams for Philadelphia. If Jaden Hicks goes in there and balls out, that would obviously help too. But again, I don't really see a path for this defense to get significantly better from what it was last year. And last year, it was probably like the 6th or 7th best defense. So for now, they're going to be at number 7. Moving over to number 6, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers have been known for their defense the past couple years, and rightfully so. This defense has been really good the past couple years. Last year, 7th in opponents' points per game, 15th in opponents' yards per game, 13th in opponents' touchdowns per game. They ranked top 10 in basically every single rushing statistic and about middle of the pack in a lot of different defensive statistics against the pass, but they were 5th in opponent interception thrown rate. You then came into this offseason with not a ton of holes, but they actually did do a lot of productive work to make this defense a lot better from what it was last year, and last year it was already really good. You add in a Derek Harmon. You now add in a Darius Slay. You traded for Jalen Ramsey. Joey Porter Jr. is just going to get better. So there is some changes here to this defense that I actually think are productive and nice moves for them too. I also have to mention Jack Sawyer they also drafted. I expect this defense to take a nice step forward. I'm going to assume TJ Watt's going to be on this team come the start of week 1. I know there's a lot of conversation about his contract. I think eventually we'll get a contract done. I do think the Pittsburgh Steelers will have to be the side that gives in a little bit, because if I'm TJ Watt, I'm demanding every single dime from this team because he's put up with a lot of BS the past couple of years. And so Pittsburgh doesn't have a ton of leverage here. Plus, if you're Pittsburgh, you're kind of going all in with this roster right now. You're kind of going all in for a championship. And without TJ Watt, you just stand no chance. So I think you have to get a deal done with TJ at some point. All in all, it's a damn good roster defensively. I do worry a bit about the safeties. Deshaun Elliott's a fine player. Juan Thornhill is cool as well. Of course, when you lose a Minkah Fitzpatrick, you're losing a veteran, you're losing a leader. I do think it was an okay trade, though, because you did get in a new tight end. And Jalen Ramsey is a great player. And I think Ramsey, at this stage of his career, even though I want to say he's a little bit older, is probably the better player in the more important position in the cornerback room, more so than the safety. But I don't think it's such a significant upgrade that it makes the secondary like 10 times better by no stretch. I just believe having an upgrade like Darius Slay, who's a veteran opposite of Joey Porter Jr., who I expect to take a nice step forward, and then having Ramsey, who can probably play a bit of safety, play a bit of nickel, play on the outside here and there. Like, Joey Porter Jr. has like one of the best support systems around him. So many great veterans to learn from. And I just think he's going to really benefit from that. So I do expect that cornerback room to be really, really good. I have some general question marks about the safety. Peyton Wilson will take a step forward. Patrick Quinn will get more comfortable. This defensive line is going to be able to get after the quarterback quite well. All in all, the Steelers defense is going to be really freaking good. It's just going to come down to, can Aaron Rodgers really help this offense and elevate elevate them to a title contender? And if you're asking me today, the answer is probably no. Moving into our top 5, at number 5, I have the Baltimore Ravens. Last year, 8th in opponents' points per game, 8th in opponents' yards per game, 9th in opponents' touchdowns per game, 20th on third down, 14th in the red zone. They're going to have to clean that up this upcoming season. Number 1 in multiple categories against the run, and a little bit below average against the pass, but I do think there is, I guess, some reason for that. They have to be bad against the pass because that's just how damn good they are against the run. Teams are essentially forced to pass the ball, and if they can't pass in this team, it's just going to be a long day in the office. And I look at this Ravens team, man, it's good. It is really good defensively. I also felt like last year, the defense started off a little bit slow, new defensive coordinator. It took them a couple weeks to get going, but by the end of that season, that defense was really freaking good. And I think as we head into this upcoming season, it's even better this year. And if we expect guys like Nate Wiggins to take a step forward, Malachi Starks now enters this roster. I mean, let's just go through it. Front 7, you got Matt Abike, you got Travis Jones, Broderick Washington, Kyle Van Noy. You also have Odafe Owe. You bring in Mike Green, who, man, if he can get going this year, he can get to the quarterback. I'm expecting 6, 7, maybe 8 sacks this year if he's given a nice substantial role. This is a front 7 that can absolutely get to the quarterback, and as we just talked about, 100% one of the best defensive front 7s that can just stuff the run incredibly well. So that front 7's dominant. They're going to dominate against the run. They're going to get after the quarterback. But then you look at the secondary here. Nate Wiggins now in year 2. He had a good rookie season. You now have Kyle Hamilton, who's going to play a lot of unique roles with this team. Because they took Malachi Stark, who's going to be your free safety, you can really move these guys around. Kyle Hamilton, very versatile piece. He can play on the nickel. He can play on the outside. He can play as a safety. He can even play as like a linebacker at times. He's just that much of a weapon. And the same conversation can also be said about Malachi Starks. Now, I don't think Malachi should play linebacker, but I think he can play strong safety. I think he can play nickel. I think he can also play a little bit on the outside. So there's some versatility here with both your safeties. You then go out there and you trade for Jair Alexander, who, if he somehow can stay healthy, you're talking about one of the better cornerbacks out there. Like, if healthy, Jair is probably top 10, assuming he's 100% and, his normal self. You then pair that with Marlon Humphrey, who had a great year last year. This secondary is looking really good. My only reason why I have them at my 5th spot is just that I feel a bit more confident about the other teams, just number 1, staying healthy and being elite. Like, they have the numbers to back themselves up. I think the Ravens at 5 is totally fair. I think at their lowest, this is the 8th or 7th best defense. But at their best, we could be talking about the best defense in the NFL next year. So really high upside, good depth, great starters, and I'm excited to see what this Ravens team can do next year. Moving over to number 4, I have the Houston Texans. Of course, DeMeco Ryans is yet again running that defense. The defense last year was already really good, ranking 10th in opponents' points per game, 2nd in opponents' yards per game, and 12th in opponents' touchdowns per game. They were about a top 8 to 7 unit against the run and against the pass. Very good too. A lot of interceptions for this team last year, a lot of sacks, some elite productivity. I think the reason why I have Texans over Ravens, for anyone asking, and by the way, for this entire list, I'm really open to negotiate like moving a team up or moving a team down. This is just kind of like where I have it at, but I'm not so set in stone with this list. If you want to move the Ravens to 3 or 4, that's cool. I'm not going to fight you about it. For me, the Texans are just a bit more of a playmaking team. They can force more turnovers and thus flip the field really quickly. Ravens can do so too, but the Texans just do it at a better rate. With that said, Will Anderson Jr., elite pass rusher, one of the best in the game. Danielle Hunter, same story. Front 4 in general is really solid. You got some big dudes up the middle that can stuff the run. I do think they're missing like a go-to pass rusher up the middle, but for now, you have 2 elite guys off the edge. They'll be fine. Linebackers are really good. You now add in an EJ Speed, who's going to be a nice versatile piece that can give them some depth. Secondary-wise, it might be one of the best secondaries out there. And as I mentioned, this is a unit last year that led the league in interception thrown rate. You add in a CJ Gardner-Johnson who can absolutely get to the football, and this defense is going to force some turnovers. Derek Stingley on the outside. You, of course, have Kamari Lassiter, Jalen Petrie. You add in Jalen Smith in the draft. CJ Gardner-Johnson, Jimmy Ward, Kalen Bullock. This is, to me, right now, and I might take this back here in a few minutes, but this is, to me, a top 3 secondary in the NFL. And when it comes to just forcing turnovers, it's probably the best secondary at forcing picks and creating interceptions. So because that, they're going to be at my 4 spot. I think this is an awesome defense that can do a variety of things. I don't think they're as dominant against the run as Baltimore, but I think they're a better team at flipping the field, creating turnovers, and just being a bit more balanced in general. So I love what this team is doing. I also feel extremely confident with this unit. I don't really have any general concerns with this team, barring injury or regression from a superstar, which would be shocking. Moving over to number 3, I have the LA Chargers. This is a unit last year that for the first 9 to 10 weeks of the season was by far and away the best defense in the NFL. But then they kind of showed a little bit more glimpses of weaknesses. They gave up 27 to Cincinnati, 30 to Baltimore, 40 to Tampa Bay. Just a couple games where it was like, okay, what are we doing here with this defense? Again, first half of the season, incredible, and they showed plenty of glimpses in the second half, but just a handful of games you can kind of see some chinks in the armor, if you want to say. It also doesn't help they got 32-point bombed against Houston in the playoffs as well, so that also does hurt. But statistically speaking, 2nd in opponents' points per game, 11th in opponents' yards per game, number 1 in opponents' touchdowns per game, 4th on opponent third down conversion rate, 2nd on opponent red zone scoring percentage. Solid enough against the run, really good against the pass. This is a balanced defense with a lot of nice pieces. I think that this is a unique defense. When I look at some of these other rosters and I look at their depth chart and I'm like, the depth chart is ridiculously good, and then you have a really good defensive coordinator that also helps them. I look at this Chargers depth chart, and I think of the couple teams I've talked about recently, it's maybe one of the weaker depth charts, but their defensive coordinator is so smart and so good, and their entire coaching staff is like that, by the way, that I think it gives them a bit of an advantage compared to some of these other defenses. Again, not saying that they don't have great defensive coordinators, because they all do. If you're a top 10 defense, you have a good defensive coordinator. I just think the Chargers guy is just a little bit different. He just knows what he's doing. I mean, he could just turn stone into diamonds, and that's really important for this Chargers team. But that's not to say the depth chart is bad by no stretch. It's a solid depth chart with some underrated pieces that played a big role last year, and I think are going to continue to play a big role this year. Deshaun Hand, Tyre Tarp, Tuli Tuipulotu, Khalil Mack is back, Junior Colson in a bigger role, Troy Dye, Dion Henley, Denzel Perriman. In the secondary, Derwin James, Alohi Gilman, Tariq Steele, Elijah Molden, Dante Jackson, Cam Hart, Benjamin St-Juste. A lot of pieces here. Now, not a lot of these guys are household names, but I think they should be. These are really solid players. And again, this defensive coordinator, man, he just has a way of turning players. Like Elijah Molden, for example, was somebody who had a couple good years, but last year really did take a nice step forward. It's a young secondary, a lot of young pieces on this team. But I do think this team is building towards the right direction. And I think this defense is just going to put up good numbers that we may not look at this defense and think, wow, it's stacked with superstar talent. But they're just going to find a way to get the job done. And as long as you can do that, I don't have any complaints. Coming in at number 2 is the Philadelphia Eagles. Arguably the best defense last year, if not the best, one of the best for sure. Number 1 in opponents' points per game, number 1 in opponents' yards per game, 3rd in opponents' touchdowns per game, 8th in opponent third down conversion rate, 6th in opponent red zone scoring percentage. Really good against the run, probably a top 10 unit, and definitely a top 10 unit against the pass. It is an absolutely loaded roster. The only reason why they're not my number 1 is because I felt like they had a pretty brutal offseason of just losing a lot of depth guys who are really important pieces from where they were last year. But more specifically, the team that's at my number 1, boy, oh boy, we'll get to them here in a second. A lot of changes for them. Let's talk about the Eagles first, though. It's a stacked roster, and for the most part, your starting guys are still there. You lose Darius Slay, you lose Josh Sweat, you lose Milton Williams. Those are some big losses, but if there was a team that I respected enough and knew that they could just completely find replacements in an instant, it's the Philadelphia Eagles. Moro Ajomo is going to be in for a big role this year. Jordan Davis, a bigger role. Jalen Carter, a bigger role. You did draft Ty Robinson. I think he'll have some place too. Josh Uche is now in the mix. Nolan Smith will probably be your full-time starter, so a big year for him. Zach Bond, Jeremiah Trotter, Kobe Dean, Jahad Campbell, one of my favorite players in the draft. I think he's going to be a superstar for them. Azeez Ojulari gets a nice role increase for him here. He can get after the quarterback. Your secondary, Quinion Mitchell, Reed Blankenship, Andrew Makuba. You see my Longhorns flag. You guys know me. I love me some Longhorns. Andrew Makuba was a total steal. Killy Ringo's in for a big year, and Cooper DeJean, just kind of throw him out there, put him wherever. It's a stacked defense with some pieces that have been developing for quite some time, like Nolan Smith now entering into his 3rd year. I think Keely Ringo is now entering into his 3rd or 4th year. Aziz Ojulari is on his 2nd contract. A lot of guys here with some experience in the system that are now going to be asked to play a bigger role. And that could hurt this defense for sure. But I think there's just so much top-end talent here to go along with an excellent coaching staff that just knows what they're doing. And, you know, they were great last year. I expect them to be just as good, if not slightly worse. I don't expect them to be a better defense, but I don't think they're going to be so much worse that it can really move them down the board too much. I think at their worst, they're like the 7th or 6th best defense. At their best, it's like they were last year, possibly number 1. So much talent here. They can get after the quarterback. They can create turnovers. And when you have an offense that can just completely control the clock, it gives your defense less chances to be on the field. And I think that's actually part of the reason why the defense was so good last year. That offense just can hold on to the ball because they got Hurts, they got AJ, they got Saquon. They can take their time. They can let the clock drip and drip and drip while that defense is getting more water in their system. They're chilling on the bench. They're stretching back there because their hamstrings are tightening up. That's really the specialty to the Eagles. And until somebody can really hurt this offense, I expect this defense to be easily probably a top 5 unit. But they're not my number 1 because at my number 1 is the Denver Broncos. If you've been watching my channel throughout the offseason or my podcast, 1st and 10, link in the description, you guys would know that I have been extremely high on this Broncos defense for honestly the past couple weeks now, if not months. This Broncos defense is loaded with talent from what was already here last year to what they already brought in. So many underrated guys here with multiple guys having over 8 sacks last year. Not 1, not 2, not 3. I think 4 or 5 guys got 8 sacks last year to go along with some new pieces to add to their secondary, like a Jahdae Barron, who I think is, wow, a perfect addition. You also add in Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga. You had the Defensive Player of the Year last year. This defense is so good. The only concern that I do have with this defense, and it was a trend that happened last year that maybe could follow them again this year, but I just kind of have a feeling that it's not going to be as bad, is that last year against really good offenses, the defense kind of sputtered a little bit. And that was because when you went up against a good offense that had multiple good receivers, they can pick on Riley Moss or Jaquan McMillan and make it really difficult for the defensive coordinator to adjust and make plays. But now you have multiple pieces to fix those issues, like Jahdae Barron and the aforementioned Talanoa Hufanga, to sort of fix those problems. Last year, this is a team that ranked 3rd in opponents' points per game, 9th in opponents' yards per game, 2nd in opponents' touchdowns a game, 1st in red zone scoring percentage, top 5 against the run, top 15 against the pass, but I fully expect this to be a top 10 secondary next year. This Broncos team is stacked. And when you have a Pat Surtain who literally you cannot throw at, and then you look on the opposite side, you see Jahdae Barron, it's going to be tough pickings for this team, or for any team that goes up against Denver. They got to get some more picks, but what they don't get in picks, they make up for in sacks, and they're going to be a dominant team against the run next year too. Just a loaded Denver team with, by the way, an offense that I do expect to take a step forward, which will then in turn help the defense. All in all, the Broncos are my number 1 defense. But you guys let me know in the comment section below, what do you agree with? What do you disagree with? And I love you guys. Peace.